Hi, and welcome back to David Pattinson's Accused Friends. Today I want to talk about the Harvey Weinstein verdict. It's taken me a few weeks to get to this, and I did a video last year sort of previewing the trial and kind of laying out the quid pro quo that I believe existed in Hollywood, which was an exchange of movie deals for the women in return for sexual gratification for Weinstein, and seemed to me like everyone in Hollywood was happy with that arrangement. Weinstein got the gratification that he wanted, and the women got the multi-million-dollar movie deals that they wanted. Now here we are, 15, 20 years later, Weinstein's sort of retiring, and, as part of the Me Too movement, a lot of these actresses want to come in and benefit financially from his net worth through grievance. And it's clear to me that's what the Me Too movement is about. It's about profiting through grievance. And I want to talk a little bit about the case and kind of what I learned, and really the question that I don't think anyone else has really asked, how this impacts British society. And people say, well, David, was it matter? This was a foreign individual. This was a case held in the United States. How does it possibly impact us? And I think it impacts us in a significant way, and that's what I want to talk about. Let me start off with talking about Weinstein's lawyer, Donna Rotudo, who is a Chicago woman, and she made sort of three interesting comments that caught my attention and wanted to relay to you. The first one was she said if she was a man, she would insist on a consent contract for sexual relations, and this is a point I've made before, and now it's being made by the lawyer in a very high profile sex case or rape case, and it's just total common sense. I mean, I think the point of all these cases is making the man defenseless, and making the female accuser, no matter what she says, it's got to be believed, and there's got to be a conviction. And the question that always kind of comes to me is well, how are men supposed to defend themselves? Does anyone think that consent contracts are the way to go? I did before this trial, but thinking about it now, I wonder if Weinstein had a consent contract for each of these two accusers against him in the courtroom, would that have mattered? Or would it just have been believed away? Would the jury have said, hey, consent contract, that's it, not guilty? I highly doubt it. So Rotudo's talking about that, but I think these feminist cases are probably too strong to even make consent contracts relevant. The other thing Rotudo said was that she herself had never been assaulted in her life, and this was as a function of never having put herself in a vulnerable situation. And again, this is another point I've made. If women do not put themselves in vulnerable situations, surely the probability of them getting raped drops dramatically. And I think there's so much evidence that women deliberately put themselves in vulnerable situations because they want the benefit of the sexual encounter, but they don't want the cost. And of course, if they get the benefit of the sexual encounter, which in this case would be a movie deal, or maybe it's a husband, or maybe it's a boyfriend, or maybe it's a some other benefit, and that's great. But if they get assaulted, that's when taxpayers have to come in and pick up the tab. And I think that's totally unfair. And, the feminist movement, of course, depends on grievance. If there is no grievance, well, what's the point? Well, what's the point in talking about it? And, for Rotudo to come out and say, it's as simple as not putting yourself in vulnerable situations, that's not a message that anyone really wanted to talk about, and it was a minimal part of the media coverage in the case. So the two women that were accusing Weinstein was Jessica Mann and Miriam Haley, and these two women had a couple of things in common. They had both continued to have a sexual relationship with Weinstein after they were assaulted. Neither of them had reported the assault to the police. In fact, there was no police evidence in the courtroom because they had not gone to the police. I think as part of the Me Too movement, the district attorney had contacted sort of, these women sort of proactively to kind of get a court case going. It wasn't a case that the police had sort of a police report at the time or anything like that. So it was a very unique case from the point of view there was no police evidence. The other thing these two women had in common was that they waived the rape shield privilege in the case. They were happy to be known and have their name publicized as being the accusers. They didn't hide behind the curtain or could not be named for legal reasons and all this kind of stuff. They wanted the publicity. They wanted to benefit from the publicity of the case. And that's what they did, So you have, like in all these cases, the men are named and shamed regardless of innocence or guilt. Women get the rape shield protection, but now we know that women have the option to waive that should the publicity benefit outweigh the stigma of rape. So I think that's totally unfair. The bottom line really with the Weinstein case is there's two cases. There's the public case and then there's the actual court case, and they were both very different. The public case had sort of 70 plus women coming forward saying, yeah, he raped me, and all this sort of stuff. There was then the private case where it's just two women. I believe there's going to be another case in California with another couple of women. The case in New York, which I'm talking about, the evidence from the two women was weak. But the prosecution brought in other women as witnesses to say, oh yeah, Weinstein attacked me and sexually assaulted me. But of course, they were talking about instances which had not gone to trial or which Weinstein had not been convicted of. So it was total hearsay, and it was done to bolster the evidence of the case he was actually accused of. And so it set a precedent in court that, not only do you have to defend yourself as a man against the crimes you're being accused of, but you also have to defend yourself against crimes that you've not been accused of. And, I think that's highly prejudicial. If Weinstein is so guilty, why does the case have to be manipulated? Why don't you just have a straightforward case, bring the accusers in, they make the accusation, straightforward guilt. But of course, there's so much invested politically in the Me Too movement, and it's clear that the public case against Weinstein was so dramatically outside of reality, because the actual court case was sort of a kind of a regular court case in terms of, it was no different to another kind of sex case in terms of the actual evidence. What was different about it was the profile of Weinstein. He's sort of a world famous guy and, kind of almost infamous now as a result of the case. So it was prejudicial. There was also a juror that had written a book about coercive relationships with, older men and younger women and all this sort of stuff, but she was still able to be on the jury. And the sentence, so he was actually only convicted of 2 of the 5 charges against him. Third-degree rape was one conviction, sexual assault was one conviction, and then he was kind of given almost the maximum sentence of like 23 years. And one of the Me Too actresses came out afterwards and said that the sentence was justified because he'd attacked so many more women that he wasn't actually accused of. So we're accusing and convicting people of one thing, but then we're sentencing them for that thing and other things that they've neither been accused nor convicted of in a court of law. And this is kind of how the Me Too the Me Too movement has totally subverted the justice system. I've called it the feminist justice system before, but it's actually just injustice, full stop. There's no presumption of innocence till proven guilty for Weinstein. The case was prejudicial in that accusers in that particular trial are brought in as witnesses, and then a sentence is given, instead of being given, relevant to the actual convictions that, the jury decided on, it's added on to convictions that didn't actually occur based on accusations that didn't actually even make it to court. So I suppose I'm getting to how this affects British citizens, because that's kind of the title of the video, and what do we learn as British people. And I suppose, like, I started off by saying this is a foreign case, it doesn't matter to us, but the British media wanted us to be interested in it, and the British government wanted us to be interested in it. And I remember this first came to my attention in my trial, where the Crown prosecution lawyer said in his closing argument that, obviously David Pattinson is no Harvey Weinstein. And this was 2 years before Weinstein had been charged of anything, and 3 years before he'd been convicted of anything. And but yet the British Crown Prosecution Service had still presumed him guilty anyway, and as the British media had as well. And why does Britain want the British people so interested in this? And it's about sort of a form of societal control. We're going to conflate multi-million-dollar movie deals and the sexual incentive for women to sleep with the producer to get those with, a businessman in Northampton that's interviewing a female, talking about the difference between a £20,000 a year job and a £40,000 a year job. I mean, it's just totally unrelated. How many job interviews in Great Britain are, in the multi-millions with women, where they're going from either unemployment or, minimal thousands a year employment to multi-million-dollar one-off jobs, and then the spin-off benefits from the publicity, which can net them tens of millions more over the later years. So I just don't think it's the comparable elements are there. But of course, we want to create this working culture where women can have their cake and eat it too. Women can use their sexuality for benefits. You notice that in the Weinstein case, none of the actresses were prosecuted for, enticing Weinstein into a sexual relationship with them. There was not really much media coverage on the fact these women were going to his hotel room at 11 p.m. with no bodyguard or no chaperone. And there was also very, very little, if no scrutiny on the fact that the women had not gone to the police right away and acted as an accessory after the fact, in my opinion, because subsequent women were assaulted by Weinstein, allegedly, as a result of the original women not going to the police. Had all this Weinstein trial occurred back in 1990 or back in 1995 or the year 2000, all these other tens of women would theoretically not have been assaulted subsequently. But of course, the Hollywood women, actresses, enabled Weinstein. They knew they could manipulate him through their sexuality to benefit them and get these jobs. And, obviously they've allowed subsequent women to get assaulted. And yet, why don't we call them out? Why don't they get prosecuted? That would be, an equal justice system. Surely a better situation, instead of having a worldwide movement that affects kind of every business in the Western world, why can't, these women just go to the police, Weinstein gets prosecuted and convicted, and then, there's no problem. And of course, the answer is the women want to benefit from the sexual relationship. That's where these two women, they didn't go to the police. They carried on a sexual relationship with Weinstein. They were benefiting from flights and trips to the Oscars and movie deals and this sort of thing. They were telling all their friends that Weinstein was a great guy. And, it kind of undercuts this all women have to be believed narrative in the press that you see a lot. Do we believe the women when they're saying Weinstein's a great guy, or do we just believe the women when they say he's a rapist? And I think it insults the intelligence of, smart-minded people. I just think it's just sort of so much nonsense. It's pulling the wool over the eyes of, in our case, the British people. Instead of giving the full picture, we're just given a sort of sensationalized, hysterical picture, emotion-based picture. And I think it affects our business culture very, very negatively going forward. And so I kind of want to end here on what are the lessons for British women and what are the lessons for British men? And I think the lessons for British women should always be safety first. If you don't put yourself in a vulnerable situation, you're not going to get assaulted. But I think this trial sets such a bad precedent for British women, and I think you're going to see more cases in British courts sort of identical to this going forward. That's the kind of the purpose of, I suppose that's the answer to the video title. I think the actual lessons for British women in this video are, if you use your sexuality to get involved with a man of means, you can benefit from that relationship, and then you can turn around and sue later in life, kind of any time in the future really, and you can tell everyone what a victim you are, and you'll be praised in the press. And obviously there's a civil case going on with the Me Too actresses against Weinstein, and I think there's been talk of like $140 million settlement on this. I don't know if the criminal conviction is going to avoid that settlement, or it probably won't. So we're really incentivizing women to get assaulted and then financially profit from that assault. And I think it's a terrible message. It's not a message I want to give out to women. And but I want to be honest with the viewers of this video and say that's what I think the message is. Lessons for British men, I think, are pretty deadly. I think the number one message I can give is that do not, under any circumstances, have romantic relationships with an actress. Zero, just don't even do it. But the reason is, the actress could be a great girlfriend or a great wife, but she can come back against you anytime for the rest of your life. She can do a sob story in court. It's going to be persuadable because she's an actress, and you can go to prison for the rest of your life just based on that simple testimony in court. So avoid actresses like the plague, and not because they're not nice people, but it's just you don't want to go to prison for the rest of your life based on an actress making an allegation against you. And I think that's kind of the number one lesson for British men. I suppose the question, these two cases against Weinstein, one of them was a sexual encounter in 2006. Another one was a sexual encounter, I believe, in 2013. So we say, okay, it's 2020 now. One of them is 7 years subsequent. Another one is 14 years subsequent. So how many sexual relationships that you have in 2020 are going to come back and face you in court in 2034? People say, well, David, that's a long way off. I can't really think about that right now. But of course, when it's so far into the future, how do you as a man defend yourself against those accusations? There's no police report, there's no DNA, there's no evidence, there's no witnesses really that were kind of there at the time. How are you supposed to defend yourself? There was this psychiatrist in the Weinstein trial that said it was the norm for rape victims to have future contact with their abuser. And of course, it struck me as kind of there's really no evidence that it wouldn't be rape in these trials now, because we never ask the question, okay, well, if the woman wasn't assaulted, how would she behave? Would she say Weinstein was a great guy, or would she stay in touch with him, or would she not stay in touch with him, or whatever she does? It's always an example of rape. It's never a kind of, okay, well, she did this, so that means it's definitely not rape. And I think these kind of trials are going to continue. And so what we really should be doing as the British people is saying this case is so outrageous and such an injustice. And in our British courts, we're never going to have anything like this. We're always going to have presumption of innocence till proven guilty. We're always going to give everyone a right to a fair trial. And, we're not going to have these kind of people who have a sexual relationship with a man over a long period and benefit from that, be able to turn around, years and decades later and say, oh yeah, even though I've got all this benefit from this guy, he actually raped me all the way back in the day when he first met me. And, now I want to benefit again. And it'd be great if we had someone like the Justice Secretary or the British Prime Minister write to all men, assuring them that, you know, they don't have to spend the whole rest of their life looking over their shoulder at their past sexual partners, you know, dreading the day they face them in court. But of course, I haven't seen any evidence from the British government that they're going to do that. And lessons for British men. I mean, I think you just got to either avoid women at all costs when you're in British soil, or you've got to just have as much evidence as you possibly can of every romantic encounter. Photos, videos, consent contracts, you know, text messages, emails, whatever you can have, and you've got to keep them with you for the rest of your life. And people say, well, David, that's totally over the top. But, you know, here we go. This Weinstein case was pushed on us by the British press, and it was sort of heralded as a great moment for justice, even though there's a lot of injustice to get to the great moment for justice. And, you know, that's the lesson I take away. Yeah, I mean, I've been falsely accused. I've been to court once and defended myself and won. You know, how many more times have we got to go to court in the future? And, you know, talk about myself and obviously, you know, other men as well. So I do think we need to have some clear direction in this country over, you know, what we've learned from the Weinstein case and how can you defend yourself against false accusations. I don't know the answer to that question. People do know the answer, then please write to me and tell me. I think it's really, really important information. So I think overall, my summary, you know, I've talked about a lot of things here. It's not a pretty picture. Even though there's a lot of people celebrating. There was a lot of women with Weinstein in his heyday, people like Gwyneth Paltrow and Nicole Kidman and Jennifer Lawrence and Lindsay Lohan, and they all said he's a great guy. There was his wife, Georgina Chapman, who I think is British, said he was a great guy. She obviously married him, had 2 kids with him. I think it was at least 2 kids. You know, where's the female intuition with these women? Why weren't they, you know, raising the alarm? Why weren't they, you know, saying, hey, Harvey, we're not going to work with you. We're going to go and work for your rival. Why was it so easy for him to get beautiful women to come and work for him, you know, when he's treated them in such a bad way? So I think a lot of questions still unanswered, and it should be the job of the media to ask these tough questions rather than just pander to the Me Too mob. So I hope you like this video. Talked about a lot of things here in a roundabout way, and I don't think it's the last we've heard of these Me Too cases. I think they're gonna continue on for many years until society, specifically our society, says no, this is total nonsense. We're going to have a clear standard of how sexual relations can occur, and if men and women approach them in the right way, there will be no recourse, and that men and women need to be treated equally in sexual relations, not just one rule for women and one rule for men. So thanks a lot for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.